So welcome everyone again to today's webinar, which is all about leveraging EDI to drive retail revenue growth for your brand. We're going to be talking through not just kind of like what EDI is, but how are you using all of the capabilities fully within your company and making sure you have a great process set up. So before we get started, I want to do a quick poll that's going to be popping up on your screen now to understand, one, are you currently using EDI? Yes or no? Or if you don't know what it is, that's totally fine as well, because we're going to be covering a little bit of that as well too. Perfect. So we have a good mix of those who know what it is but aren't using it, some that are using it, and some who don't quite know what it is as well. So that's what we want to do for today's conversation. So I want to invite up Dipti Desai, who is the founder of Crstl, which is a modern EDI provider for brands. And really, one thing I love is she and her team are focused on helping emerging brands as well. And in a way that's a lot more personal, better customer service than some of the legacy providers. And I invited her on to provide both a overview of EDI and then some of the capabilities that you should be leveraging. She'll be sharing somewhat as it relates within Crstl to make sure you're taking advantage of all of those, but then it also applies generally as well that if you have other providers, like what you should be ensuring your provider is including for you. Dipti, welcome.
Thank you, Jordan. Nice to meet everyone.
So we'll have a little bit of a presentation, but then we'll also open up to Q&A. And so if you have any questions throughout or at the end of the conversation, we'd love to invite you up on screen to ask those. If you are able to, would love for you to join us up on video, since we have a smaller group for today. If you're traveling or working, totally understand if you can't, but we'd love to see all your faces. And with that, Deepti, I'd love to welcome you to do a quick intro and feel free to jump into the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, thank you again. The Food Bevy community is amazing. We love, Jordan, what you've built here and obviously the community by extension. So thank you for having me. I'd like to keep, I'll sort of do quick intros and then get right to it. But seeing how this is a small group, I'd love to keep this, informal. I hope that you feel like this would be a good hour or so spent of your time. So I'd like to make sure that you feel that way coming out of this. So please, at any point, feel free to jump in. Don't feel like you're interrupting. I'd love to make this a productive conversation for all involved, right? So, and can everyone hear me okay? Just to double check before I proceed.
You're good.
Righty, fantastic. Cool. I've prepared just a few slides. The idea is not to bore anyone to death, but just to give a little bit of guidance, just to aid in this discussion. So again, please stop me at any point. So sort of quick introduction. My name is Dipti Desai. I am the co-founder and CEO of Crstl. We'll talk a bit more about what Crstl does and our focus. My personal sort of, or I guess professional history is that a very long time ago, started my career as an engineer in Silicon Valley, specifically a hardware engineer. And then over time, sort of started more shifting my focus on software products. And then within that, started to really focus on building software products which have some sort of a data element at its very, very core. And so that led me sort of more down the product management path. And, if you're not familiar with it, product managers really should be thinking a lot about what makes for a very good customer experience, always bridging the gap between, the pain point and the reality, right? And always be building and creating products that a lot of people will be able to use and find useful, either make them productive or to bring them joy or to fulfill a specific purpose. And then, again, kind of been doing that for a very long period of time. And then ultimately started Crstl a few years ago with sole focus on being a B2B commerce network and leveraging the EDI protocol as it is and so on. I'm currently based in Washington, D.C. I live here with my husband of almost 16 years, I think, as of next week. And I'm a recent transplant to D.C. I moved here from San Francisco, where I've been for actually all of those 16 years. For fun, I think everyone here probably feels similarly. What is that? Who has time for that these days? But when possible, yeah, I like to spend some time outdoors, reading, traveling, board games. None of those things I have very much time for these days, but at some point, yeah. Anyway, nothing extraordinary there, fairly boring, basic hobbies. But yeah, I'll pause there, see if anyone has any questions or things I should definitely cover and spend more time on as I go on. Is there anything else to keep in mind?
No, I think that's all great so far.
All right. Awesome. So before I jump right in, I want to make sure that this doesn't feel like a spiel about Crstl or anything like that. We'll obviously talk about that, but want to make sure you all feel very, comfortable in kind of the topic at hand, right? So to sort of get right to it, what is EDI? What I found as a data practitioner, as I started to build this company, the product, and working with our customers and partners and things like that, is there's a lot of confusion around what EDI is. And I think that happens for a variety of reasons. But our hope with Crstl really is that we can enable our partners and customers to focus on building their business, growing their business, right? And to not have to worry about all of this stuff, the technology part, the product part of it, because that's really our job, right? But what an EDI is it stands for electronic data interchange. And as the name might suggest, it is a data language, right? So that two or more business entities can exchange information with each other, right? It is not a technology. There's a lot of confusion about, oh, EDI is a technology. It's an old school technology. I've heard some jokes around like, oh, it's like fax, and those are all well and good. But I think it is important to remember that it's really not a technology. It's more of a data language. And some analogies that I have used in the past that folks have told me resonated with them in terms of trying to kind of wrap their heads around what any of this is there's a few analogies, and some you may like or prefer some more than others. But one way to think about it is it's a more intricate version of like what a CSV template does, right? If we've all uploaded CSV templates to some system in the past, and you'll often notice that the solution, the software system will say, download our CSV template if you want to understand how to upload data back into our platform. Like, for the first name should be in the first column, the last name should be in the second column, and the name of the city that person is in the third column, right? Let's just say that's what the template is saying. If so, they have effectively defined how you will be exchanging information with that system, and they want you to complete the information in that template per those rules, right? Meaning they don't want you to put the city name first, then the last name, then the first name, right? Because the system will throw an error back at you and you'll have to re-enter the data and so on and so forth, right? So it's not that different from it. The other way to think about it is it's like the English language, right? We're all today communicating and seeing written kind of word in the English language. And what really the purpose of that language is, and we don't even really think about it at this point, is that it's helping standardize business communication amongst each other, right? English is not my first language, so if I came here and started speaking in my native language, everyone will be likely very, very puzzled. But that's the purpose of the English language, is that it is helping to normalize communication between all of us, so that we don't all have to sort of use translations and other kind of nuance and dialect detectors to be able to understand what this person is even saying, right? And the last analogy I'll mention is when we are using, say, Gmail, we're not really at all thinking about the protocols that are powering email, right? Like SMTP or POP3, which, by the way, have been around for decades at this point. But if you're using Gmail or Superhuman or Outlook or other email or email-like applications, Front or Intercom or anything of those sorts, they're all actually leveraging those protocols, right? And we don't really even think about it because we're very much just dealing with the second, third layer of the application or the product that has been built on top of it, right? So these are all just ways to streamline, standardize, normalize bring some method to the madness, take your pick, however it would make sense to you to internalize that. But that's really what EDI is doing. And in this particular case, as it relates to the food bevy community, EDI helps bring some method to the madness, in terms of how you can transact with retailers or integrate with warehouse management software or anything of that sort, right? So again, it is not a technology. It has been around for a while, much like the English language has been around for a while, much like SMTP POP3 have been around for a while. But really what it is when people say EDI is broken, EDI is hard, etc., really what they're talking about is like, imagine if in 2024, for those of us who've used Hotmail or Yahoo Mail in the past. I'm unclear if I guess those are still around. I see one or two people using it now and then. But it's the equivalent of that, right? Is if how we would feel if those were our only options in 2024 to be using, versus a Gmail, which itself now is coming up on a couple of decades, right? Versus something more modern like that. And that's really what folks are talking about is the ease of use and the kind of the modern aspect of or lack thereof
So
what.
Deepti, with EDI, I think for a lot of food and beverage founders, right? I think a lot of them are looking to understand like, my distributor or retailer is asking me to use EDI to accept orders. And I think, right, like one of the primary use cases in our industry is order receiving
Yes.
and order taking, right? And so I think it's like, would love to kind of talk through those core uses because I think that background is like a good case because it's all about like every platform, every software can use that that differently and that protocol differently. And so kind of talk through where, how Crstl and other kind of providers in the EDI space are using it in ways that brands should know about.
Yeah, definitely. I'll speak to how Crstl is doing it because I have very little knowledge of how others do it. But just very quickly, Crstl is a modern B2B commerce network, and really, as the name implies, we're in the our mission is to help businesses work as easily as possible with their business customers, right? So in the food bevy community context, and for all of you, really what we're enabling here is, where the Crstl logo is in the middle, is imagine your company's logo. And on the one hand, on the left-hand side, we're focused on getting you up and running as quickly as possible with any of your retailers, distributors, online marketplaces. So whether that's, UNFI, a KeHE, a Target, or, a Core-Mark, Wegmans, Kroger. I mean, it's a very long list, as you guys know, and we support pretty much any and all of those retailers. And I use retailers as a shorthand for that includes distributors and online marketplaces. So I'm not more verbose than needed. But that's really kind of what the purpose of the left-hand side of the network as we build it is. And one of the customers tell us, and we feel this way internally as well, one of the perhaps more powerful things about the way we have built Crstl is, tomorrow, if you come to us with a retailer or distributor that none of our customers, for whatever reason, has worked with in the past, that doesn't deter us from actually being able to set up that integration and still get you up and running in a matter of 2-3 weeks, right? And the reason for that is we've invested a lot in the core technology that is involved in standing up that retailer integration, right? And that the integration, quote unquote, has many parts to it. It's the actual connectivity itself. It is the part in the UI where you can go and actually interact and transact and as Jordan said, sort of manage and process that order end to end, et cetera. But that's kind of one of the powerful things there. And then on the right hand side, if any of you guys have to take us seriously, we realize that we need to integrate with, minimally, maybe you have an inventory management system, for example, say like a Deer Systems, now known as Sin7 Core. Maybe you have QuickBooks, maybe you have NetSuite, maybe you're integrating, wanting us to integrate with your warehouse management system, right? So anything that makes the data about the goods and the money, if you will, kind of flow seamlessly, that is Shopify, right? So we also have first-class native integrations with a variety of systems like that. And much like the left-hand side, on the right-hand side as well, we've invested a lot in the technology and the platform to, be able to stand you up, get you up and running with any number of systems in a very, very time-efficient manner. to bring it back to why does any and all of this matter, this may look familiar to many of you, or certainly the business process might look very familiar to many of you, right? So on the left-hand side of this picture here is the retailer or distributor that you are currently working with, want to work with, may work with in the future. So that's, who's kind of pictured on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is your company, correct? And then we are sort of this invisible layer behind the scenes, orchestrating and enabling all of this. The industry jargon for what this process is it's called order to cash workflow. And the picture you're seeing in front of you is a very simplified, almost a simplistic version of that workflow. But as you can imagine, this is, you will receive a purchase order from the retailer. And then once you receive that purchase order, it could be, by the way, we support wholesale orders, we support direct store delivery orders, we also support dropship orders, right? So all of those fulfillment methods are things we support. And once that order is received by you, then it kicks off a number of downstream steps, right? Maybe I'll take a quick step back here. Don't let this picture, or in general, that process confuse you or overwhelm you. I am a fan of analogies, as you can probably tell by now. But this is actually very similar to, for instance, if you've ever ordered anything on, say, DoorDash or Uber Eats. This is in some ways similar, right? Because we place our order on one of these apps. Like, let's say you order for dinner tonight, and then we get a notification saying the restaurant has confirmed your order. Then we get another notification saying your food is on the way. Then we get another notification saying your food has been delivered. And somewhere along the way, we've already made the payment, right? This is actually very, very similar, is really that communication between the buyer and the supplier really is what's going on, right? So you receive the purchase order. The retailer expects an acknowledgement. They'll expect shipment notices, right? This is all about, you ordered 100, units of XYZ. We expect that it will get here no later than such and such date. And really you're communicating that in a B2B context to your business customer via the ship notice. This is also the step where, GS1 128 labels are involved, and packing slips might be involved and things like that. We support all of that out of the box in compliance with the retailer's requirements. And then the invoice as well, right? Like once the goods have left the warehouse, there's the invoice step. So at a very high level, this is sort of really, again, the buying process between the retailer and the brand is what we're facilitating. Perhaps very important to state that it is all done in compliance with the retailer's requirements, right? So a big part of what we do is interpreting, translating, simplifying, humanizing as much as possible in the business landscape, all of the requirements that a retailer has. And one last quick thing I'll say on this slide for now is we pretty much support any and all types of EDI documents that are required to be fully compliant with the retailer. So in addition to the 850, which is the PO, the 855, which is the acknowledgement, the 856, which is ship notice, 810, which is the invoice, other documents can come into play. So if you're doing drop ship, the 846 comes into play. Sometimes there are errors, which they'll send through the 864. There's grocery POs, grocery PO changes, 875, 876, or just a normal PO change, which is the 860. There's a whole sort of alphanumeric soup here of EDI documents, and we support them all, right, for you. Because the idea is, like, when you work with the retailer, everything you need to work with them should be covered by us, and we are very focused on that. So I'll pause here. I know that was a bunch, but more than happy to elaborate on anything I can.
Awesome. I think that's really good. I think I'm just reading a question that we have here. I think, some brands have a question around like how to use EDI to improve their whole workflow, because I know that, and you can talk through Crstl specifically and like how it works, because, even just thinking about T-Squares, when I ran that, we get orders in via email, right? Like put that into our own Excel dashboard. And then we just have like documents we're emailing back and forth. And, when we're couple hundred stores, like it was manageable, but getting to the point where it wasn't, easy to do. But even like if someone using Crystal, can you walk through maybe how like the process looks for receiving in orders, making sure it gets processed and invoicing so that, does everything stay within a platform like Crystal versus having to communicate things via email or other systems?
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is, for kind of a more detailed demo about our product, it's probably best to schedule some time with us, and we'll walk you through it systematically. But in terms of how it works with Crstl, really it is, think of us as an extension of your team. And so think of us as, as your technical team that helps you work with your biggest customers, right? And biggest customers, maybe you don't have the volume today, but you've landed this key account, which is, a huge deal. It's a big milestone. And we want to play a role in helping that business grow and to grow with you, right? So think of us as an extension of that technical team that helps you work with your biggest customers when they need EDI. One of the common questions we get is, so when do I know to get on something like this? So it actually happens, it so happens that in order to facilitate these steps, it kind of varies by the retailer, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, which is in some cases the retailer actually requires you to work with, be EDI capable in order for them to do business in the first place, right? So that point, you're very much kind of getting onto something like that pretty early on. Some retailers will say, well, you can get started with us, but maybe there's a 3-month, 4-month grace period. But during that time, you're expected to get more digitized, get EDI compliant, and things like that. So at that point, it's not happening on day one, but maybe by day 120, you're up and running. In some cases, there isn't such a requirement, but you naturally sort of hit a point in your business where you realize, like, wow, this email back and forth is actually not working out at all, because now we're just going to have to start hiring people, and you can't maybe necessarily justify the cost, right? So it depends a little bit per retailer. And one of the, I know this will sound self-serving and biased, but one of the mistakes we see brands often making, and totally empathize, right? We're a smaller company as well. So we totally understand. But I will say that it is important to make some of these operational excellence investments early on, because it is sort of a true case of like a stitch in time saves nine, is really important to make some of these investments early on. And we've spoken to quite a few customers who it feels like at the end of it all, they'll be saving maybe $50 here and there. And they choose to not make those investments. And again, it does end up catching up to them not long after. So would really request, implore everyone to be very mindful of operational excellence, because when you start working with these retailers, you've now in some ways you've now entered the big leagues, right? And so it is important to be thoughtful and make those investments accordingly. Okay. So that's one. And in terms of how it works with Crstl, it's pretty straightforward. We jump on a call with the customer, make sure we understand all of their requirements. Sometimes customers don't know exactly what they're even looking for, so we talk them through sort of what it is their pain points are, what it is really that they're looking for. And if everything is good to go, then sign a contract with us, and pretty much we then kick off the onboarding process with the retailer. We take care of the full onboarding process for you. You don't have to do anything. We'll obviously, ask for your input on certain things, like what's your vendor ID and things like that, because only you can, only you would have that information. So you're tightly involved, but you're not having to per se do anything, right? And the typical onboarding time we say is 2 weeks. Depending on the retailer, it can be less, it can be a little bit more, because we obviously collectively have that dependence on the retailer to move through and move along in the process. And then you go live, and you're basically ready to receive the orders and to process. And perhaps the best way to think about, to the previous sort of point around, is everything in one place, etc. It's very much, think of it like your Gmail inbox, perhaps, right? Where all of the emails that have come, all of the emails that you've sent, any drafts, anything in between is all right there for you, or the ability to write an email, whatever it might be. So it is all in one platform. And we also support integrations with a variety of these different systems related to inventory and accounting and finance and things like that, warehouse. So if you need those downstream integrations, we make that possible as well. And all of that is available and possible through our UI. So you never, that's why we sort of say we're a no-code EDI platform, is because we have built this product and this platform for business owners and business users, right? Who should not have to understand technology per se to do business.
Dipti, I know you mentioned that if anyone wants to kind of see like a full demo, we can schedule a time with you. Can you walk through maybe some of the steps that Crstl and EDI enables, from like receiving the purchase order all the way through to invoicing, in terms of like what kind of options retailers do within there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so this slide is probably still highly relevant here. So the very first step is I'll just use the email inbox analogy, especially if you've never had to use EDI, et cetera, before. But literally imagine your Gmail inbox in front of you. You will receive that first purchase order, right? Once you have gone live, gone through the onboarding process, which, like I said, takes a couple of weeks, and we take care of that for you. The purchase order now lands in your inbox in Crstl, and that's like receiving a new email, right? And then once that purchase order comes in, we know our UI is designed knowing that what the downstream requirements are by that retailer. So let me give you a specific example. The next step is acknowledgement, which is EDI 855, but not everyone requires it, right? So for instance, if you're working with Target, they don't require, for Target wholesale, they don't require a specific acknowledgement step. But if you are working with UNFI, they require that, right? And we show that to you, or don't show it to you, on the Crstl UI accordingly, right? So we don't, for instance, if Target doesn't require the acknowledgement step, when you're actually stepping through 1, 2, 3, the steps of processing that order from Target, we will not show you the acknowledgement step, right? We will just show you the shipment notice step as an instance for the next step. But for UNFI, we know that they require it, and so we show it and provide you some form kind of boxes to enter the data that is needed, et cetera. We'll see what the future of data entry into a UI is in the age of AI. I'm personally very excited to, and a very side note, excited to see how that process all becomes much simpler. And then on the shipment notice side, so for instance, many retailers call it the advanced shipment notice step, but there are some differences. Like a KeHE doesn't actually have that. They have a slightly different version of it, which is called RTS, right? Ready to ship, as an instance. So if you're processing the order from a KeHE, then we will therefore show you, it's called ready to ship, and any kind of steps within that are related to that. And then invoice is more or less pretty similar across the board. So that step is common. But then, within that, there's a lot of things we do, right? Like how can we automate things behind the scenes so you don't have to enter the same data from one step to the next, right? If there is anything like that, we take care of a lot of that automation, et cetera, for you. So the amount of new data entry needed is very, very minimal. But those are some differences. There are some additional differences as well, which again, we take care of when we're building the software and the product. Is Target, will send like one purchase or order envelope. And then in that one envelope, they'll have, a couple dozen or more purchase orders, right? So when we show it to you in the UI, we show you line by line every single purchase order that has been contained in that envelope, versus just showing you kind of this one envelope, which, is pretty hard for you to work with if we haven't also done the work of splitting it, line by line. Then it makes it very easy for you to manage and process those orders. Or, I could go on, but there are some retailers that, for instance, will place an order in cases, right? The purchase order will come in cases, but they expect you to ship in packs, and then they will expect you to invoice in cases, which is how they had placed the order in the first place. So sort of this unit of measure back and forth is also something that our software already simplifies and shows you out of the box. So those are just a few kind of examples of, all these retailers while they all leverage kind of this underlying data language, they still implement it in different ways because their business processes are just different, right? But our job is to know their different business processes, know their different requirements, and then present it to you in a very consistent way so that whether you've received an order from a UNFI or whether you've received an order from a Target or KeHE, it looks as similar and as simple, so that the use of software is very, very intuitive for you.
And then Deepti, I was thinking about too in terms of like shipping and logistics. Does Crystal help to provide the kind of compliance labels and documentations that you need for shipping? And then if you're like scheduling freight, I know right sometimes with KeHE you can either schedule where it's delivered or where they pick up. Is all the information kind of within here as well?
Yes, 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 absolutely. And that is why the shipment notice step, the third one that you see here, is the most important step in the order processing. So yes, we provide the GS1 128 labels and the packing slips out of the box. And this is yet another example of where we take care of the requirements from the retailer perspective. So as an example, UNFI typically does not require GS1 128 labels, but many others do, right? And so again, in our UI, we make it clear that this retailer or distributor doesn't require it, and in other cases they do. It is not uncommon, for instance, to receive, depending on the size of your business, the stage of your business, the relationship you have with Target, for instance, et cetera. It's not uncommon to receive one purchase order that actually results in, 50 shipments or 5 shipments, right? Some multiple shipments versus like it just being a clean one PO results in one shipment. So in that case, our software automatically knows that. And so it will allow you to print 5, 50, how many ever GS1 128 labels that may be needed to properly process that order. And then, yeah, likewise in the case of, whether it's pickup, et cetera, that is part of, we internally, we call it as like flavors. Like it's still, Target, but, they have the DSD flavor or the .com flavor or the wholesale flavor or similar to on the KeHE side. And so depending on kind of what that flavor is, you see, the options in the UI accordingly.
And then how does it integrate if you have like a warehouse that's shipping out? Does like the warehouse that you work with use Crystal to process orders, or does it kind of connect to their WMS?
Yeah, great question. So depending, it varies a little bit from WMS to WMS, and we've done by now multiple versions of this already. So I'll start from perhaps like the simpler version to like the more maybe automated or common version. So the more simpler version might be that the warehouse is actually an older one and maybe is thinly staffed and things like that, where they don't have the bandwidth or the ability to integrate with a system like ours. So but they're still the ones doing the fulfillment for the brand. So in that case, to the extent that the brand is comfortable, we allow the 3PL to log into our system and complete the order processing for you, right? Meaning send out that shipment, create the shipment notice, send it out, print the GS1 120 labels, the packing slips, whatever it is that you expect of them to do. All of that is possible from within our software. Then there is another flavor of how some WMSs work, where they have been around for long enough in some cases, where their systems will send out the advanced shipment notice based on the purchase order and things like that. And so in that case, the integration is primarily so that they have the order information and so on, so that they can generate the advanced shipment notice on their side. And that goes out from their system anyway. In some cases, the WMS is actually very modern, but they've been very focused on fulfilling direct-to-consumer orders. So they don't have any ability to, generate an ASN on their own, generate an ASN or the GS1 120 labels and so on and so forth. So then we have, so that WMS and Crystal, they're modern, we're modern, we have APIs. And so we've integrated with each other so that when you're in our UI and if the two systems are integrated, then for example, the bill of lading number in the advanced shipment step ASN step will be pre-populated based on the information it received from the warehouse software, right? And so that's like an example of something that you don't have to manually enter. And also because Crstl is integrated into them, they can print and generate those compliant GS1 128 labels now from within their warehouse management software, right? And because we made it available, because we have the know-how and the technical capabilities to surface the GS1 128 labels with the compliance requirements and the details from the retailer baked in. So as you can see, even with integrating with WMSs, there's a few ways we could go about it just based on their capability.
Perfect. One other question someone messaged me was been working with some retailers, they'll mention how like, oh, we use so and so for EDI and like name a company. Do brands have to work with that same provider, or can they work with Crstl to like service any trading partner?
Yeah, this is actually one of the biggest myths in the industry, which is that I have to work with a certain company. It turns out that I can think of only one retailer. We can, sort of share more offline who and things like that. But in 99.9999% of the cases, you do not need to work. You don't have to work with any one particular solution. You have a choice. What I don't obviously know kind of all of the reasons that myth came to exist. If I had to sort of take a well-intentioned a guess at like what a well-intentioned reason might be behind that myth is that when we onboard, we have to test with certain companies, like they build the testing software, but they may also have a brand-facing product, and so that can sometimes cause confusion when saying you have to work with them. For the testing process, which is basically a one and done process, which takes, call it 2 to 4 weeks or 1 to 4 weeks, just depending. That's about the extent to which the testing software, et cetera, needs to be involved. But after that, on an ongoing basis, you very much have a choice. So exercise the right to that choice.
Perfect. And then I know you mentioned a couple things, but are there any other common points of confusion with EDI as it comes to like getting set up or working with retailers that you've encountered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say maybe I'll repeat. There's probably three that come to mind. I'll probably just repeat the first two and then maybe introduce a third one. One, folks feel like, oh God, this is this old technology. Like, why do I have to even still use this? So as I mentioned, it is not a technology. It is really just kind of some sort of a standard to enable two businesses to communicate with each other, a la CSV template, a la the English language, and some of those parallels that we talked about. So that's one. The second one is, Jordan, the question that you asked just before this one, that you have to use a certain provider. Again, it is not mandated. There's testing products that we have to use built by certain companies, but that doesn't also mean that their brand facing product is what you have to use. So that's a second myth, is know that you have a choice and pick the solution that is best for your business. And the third myth, I will say, again, this may sound a bit biased, but the third myth is that brands think like, oh, the EDI is so old and so expensive, right? So we've hopefully addressed a little bit of that old part of it. On the expensive piece, what I'll say is think about this as an investment to work with your biggest customers. You really want to be thoughtful, in picking a provider. And this is like software, right? I sort of joke that building software is like, caring for a screaming, crying infant that never grows up, right? And it truly is like that. People love to think that, oh, you've already built the feature, like, why do you even, need to like do anything to it? But this is exactly like, and the job of any good software company is to be continuously innovating, right? And we're seeing the rate at which technology is changing around us. If we don't innovate, we will die, rightfully so. And you cannot innovate unless you have smart people on your team, right? And innovation happens by virtue of having really, really talented people on the team, right? And so and in order to benefit from the continuously increasing power of technology with hopefully kind of, the cost of delivering that technology going down. But when we say the cost of delivering technology, it's really kind of the compute and, these other resources. The smart people, as we would all agree, that cost can't and shouldn't go down, right? So I would just kind of really, again, I completely understand if folks feel like this is pretty biased, but been building software for a very long time at this point, and I will say that this is one of the few industries where you have to be waking up every day a little bit paranoid, thinking about like what new tech is going to come and make all of this very redundant, right? And so we have to be making those investments today so that a year from now, you're still happy with our product, right? Those are the time horizons on which minimally, if not 1 year, 3 years, we're making investments. So I think the third part is also really important, is to think about, what percentage of your revenue is really being spent on this platform that is enabling you to compliantly transact with the retailer. So I think that's a myth that, again, I can't speak to the pricing structures and the costs, et cetera, of the other solutions. But what I will say for ours is that it ends up being a very, very fair value exchange between what we provide and what the customers need and want. So I think I'll say those three.
No, I think that's super helpful. And one company that reached out as well, we're kind of like, yeah, I use EDI because I have to, but it sometimes like makes my business more difficult. I'm not sure they didn't explain like the details, and I'm wondering if it's because the way that it's being implemented by their provider is more relative to like an older technology platform and versus like a more modern UI.
Yeah, I mean, but possibly, I mean, because building again, I mean, building the kinds of physical product, the delicious, tasty, healthy, fun food and beverage products that all of you build is, it's hard in its own right. Building software is also hard in its own right, right? So and it's art and science, because there are some best practices in terms of how software can and should be built, but even those are changing by the day, right? And not everyone that builds software is necessarily, there's kind of a spectrum in terms of their kind of, finesse and familiarity and sophistication with building said products, right? And those manifest themselves in your user experience and support and other things. So.
Perfect. We'll be wrapping up soon. Does anyone have any other additional questions for Dipti before we get off? You can enter those in the chat or jump on the video and ask those directly. I guess one other thought was that I've kind of seen come up is, making the transition from taking orders in Excel to moving to a EDI provider. Is it something that like you overlap, that you end up having to like turn it on or off one day? Like how do you kind of plan to make those transitions?
Yeah, definitely. So we see transitions happening in a few different ways. We see transitions happening from another solution provider to Crstl, for instance, in which case there's a lot of considerations around business continuity and things like that. And there are considerations like the one you mentioned, which is going from a more spreadsheet model to something like this. I mean, really, in both of those cases, you should be thinking about business continuity and always be working very closely with your buyer or contact at the retailer to make sure their expectations are taken into account, right? So, for instance, let's say you do a go live and that next PO that you're receiving comes in through EDI. You want to make sure that any of the other previously open POs have been closed out, have been invoiced, and things like that. So I would highly recommend in those cases, maybe it's about a month or so of coordination with your buyer as you're transitioning from one to the other. But it will save you a lot of heartache to just be over communicative and make sure that all the I's are I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that sort of thing. But highly recommend in those cases staying in close touch with your broker, buyer, etc. at the
Yeah, I
retailer.
was gonna say because I have a couple of questions came in about that. Like, hey, I'm working with one provider now, and it's not the best, but I feel like the transition, if I was to move over to Chris or someone else, would be more of a challenge. Have you had to work through any of those other issues, and like, have you found that is easier than people expect, or it does have challenges, but you just have to go through proper change management?
Yeah, it really is that. And those migration playbooks are something that we've built, internally. And like I said earlier, we take the responsibility, we take the responsibility of doing those migrations, the onboarding, etc., very seriously. And we have very good muscle at this point for having done that. I will say that mainly just make sure you're accounting for enough time. Sometimes we'll have customers who have 6 weeks left to go on their previous contract with another provider, and that doesn't give anybody enough time to, sort of systematically cut over. So I would say minimally start thinking about it 4 to 6 months out, before you are ready to wind down your contract. And then kind of do a systematic migration. And I think, Jordan, you're exactly right, is that the migration, we don't take it lightly, right? In the sense, we don't say, oh, it's just super easy, just, come over and like no big deal. It is a big deal. There is a business process change occurring, but also it's not rocket science, and we are very checklist oriented within the company, and we manage through that process, right? So just everyone being very clear on requirements around go live, and what's open PO wise that needs to be closed out, and maintaining that touch point with their buyer. It's very, very possible. We've done it many, many times over. So as long as everyone is a little bit thoughtful, a bit patient, uh, it's a process that will take maybe a couple months, depending on how many retailers you work with, what integrations you have, but it can be time well spent, right?
And then someone saw that you have a integration with Shopify. Is that right? What
Yeah,
does that integration look like? I'm guessing like how is someone's like selling through with or have integrate with Shopify? What does that integration look like, and how does a brand use that?
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thank you for asking that, Stephen. And if you'd like to kind of add anything to your question, and about your specific kind of needs and situation, happy to layer that in as well in my response. Is there anything you'd like to add about kind of your specific need or workflow?
I think I don't know, see if you want to ask that directly, or I can say I know he's like selling most with e-commerce with some retail, and I think maybe the question, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, was about like, am I using this to help make an impact with my e-commerce orders, or is it for like taking wholesale orders through Shopify? Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so our Shopify integration, as you probably, oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I couldn't find the unmute button. It was more to do with like what level of plan, Shopify plan do you have to have? Do you have to have the wholesale plan on Shopify for the EDI to work on the wholesale side of it? That was one thing, because that's like 2,300 a month with Shopify, which I can't go to that yet. So
Yeah, great question. Yeah, no, it actually turns out that you can be on any, essentially we have Shopify and Shopify Plus customers both using our integration, so you don't have to be on Shopify Plus. It's a great question. And the reason brands use our Shopify integration is for a few different things. One is because, maybe they already started direct to consumer. They're now expanding omni-channel into all these retailers and marketplaces, and they just want to see all of the orders in one place, right? So that's sort of a pretty typical use case. And then especially, for instance, if they're working with Target.com or NeimanMarcus.com, for instance, those order volumes are just so high that they really care about automation in addition to centralizing it. Because especially in the cases of those .coms, it could be that their WMS and their Shopify are integrated. So then to be able to send that order on to the WMS for downstream fulfillment, et cetera, is a big use case. And we have customers both across Shopify and Shopify Plus, and wholesale and direct store delivery and .com, all actively using this integration. Also in the cases of .com, for example, inventory levels, to the extent that the brand feels confident about the inventory levels in Shopify being sort of the source of truth, then we also enable sending that inventory level back to the said retailer by virtue of the Shopify integration. There's also some interesting things we're doing on the ASN and the invoice side of things, because Shopify, as it stands today, doesn't support in their APIs like the fields we would need to pull in the bill of lading number and the SCAC code and things like that from the WMS side. But we're in pretty close touch with the Shopify teams relating to this API and things like that. So together we have some plans around expanding kind of the possibilities of our app there as well. But already right out the gate, there's a ton of value that brands on Shopify and Shopify Plus doing wholesale DSDN.com while being able to leverage it.
All right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. I think that's great. So I think we'll wrap up here. Thanks so much, everyone, for your questions and for joining. And I did want to share that Dipti and Crstl extended an offer to everyone in our food beverage community to get 25% off your entire first year. And just let me know, reach out to the team, let them know you heard through our webinar, and they'll be able to honor that. But and seeing that transition that a lot of brands have made for some of the legacy providers to something like Crstl, it makes a big difference in ease of use and understanding to make sure that you are able to manage your order and order processing a lot easier, and that's actually a value add instead of something that you dread doing. So Dipti, thanks so much for being on today and for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to the opportunity to work together. And Jordan, thank you as always so very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye.